Isla Cedros is an island off the Pacific coast of the Baja California peninsula, with a unique ecosystem and climate only measuring 35 by 20 kilometers or 22 by 10 miles in size. Nonetheless, it was still a haven full of resources, both marine, containing kelp forests, sea mammal rookeries, and abalone beds, and also on land, with a species of pygmy mule deer and brush rabbits inhabiting the island, as well as chaparral forests made up of juniper and pine trees in its higher elevations, where it gets its Spanish name from. This made it a prime spot for human settlement, which archaeological digs have found goes back to 12,000 years ago, to Paleo-Native times. The historic inhabitants of the island gave it the name Humalgua, or place of fog, due to the island being shrouded in mist. This is why the Spanish, at the time of contact in 1540, gave them the name Humalgueno. The indigenous people were a branch of the Cochimi Nation, who, although 23 kilometers or 13 miles as the crow flies from the coast, maintained a close relationship to their kin on the mainland. And what helped them keep in frequent contact with one another? The answer is a specially crafted canoe that was capable of holding a large load of cargo and people, while also being able to handle the rough sea conditions that exist between the island and the mainland. They had 5 or 6 balsas that they used for fishing, of pine or cedar wood, as long as 12 or 15 feet, and so big that one could hardly get one's arms around them. They are cylindrical in the part that is beneath the water, and flat where those that go inside sit. Without any hollowed part, they carry on either side so that they have support several curved hooked bundles of cedar poles, many and very well bound, each to the others, and as long as the same canoes. They row them with some poles as long as 2 or 3 handspans, or 9 inches, and as fat as 3 fingers, with a triangular 3-pointed blade at the end of each one of them, of this figure that measures from point to point 5 or 6 fingers." Unquote. This description of the watercraft of Isla Cedros was written by Francisco de Ulloa, the first European to come across the island in 1540. It gives us a descriptive account of the dimensions and composition of the watercraft used by the Humalguenos. To reiterate, a sort of canoe whose bottom was an elliptical, rectangular, thick wooden board 12 to 15 feet in length, made of redwood that had drifted from the north. This was not mentioned, as the Spanish were not familiar with redwood at the time. However, to this day, it drifts down to the island as driftwood, and would have been the most suitable candidate for creating the bottoms of the watercraft. This is further supported by an incredible discovery in 2002 at a dig, which unearthed one of these giant redwood planks, worked into the shape described by the explorer, albeit slightly smaller in size. It was discovered on a midden on the island, measuring 3.16 meters in length, half a meter in width, and 22 centimeters thick on average, with the underside on one end measuring 28 centimeters, or 11 inches. The plank shows evidence of being chopped and chiseled, but not with any metal tools. It also showed evidence of linear crushing, showing where the bundles of poles would have been tied to the plank, as was mentioned in the account. Surprisingly, radiocarbon analysis dated the piece from 1725 to 1765, far into the mission era period of the region, which conflicts with the historical narrative that the Humalguenos were removed from the island in 1732. Therefore, the significance of this piece is that it shows that the Humalguenos still clung onto their land and watercraft making traditions later than was established. This piece, however, is not the only worked piece of wood that has been attributed as being part of the Humalgueno watercraft. In 2006, after receiving reports of a site that was being encroached and eluded by locals, archaeologists at San Jose del Faro came across a fisherman's camp and a plank of wood being used as a table. They recognized it was worked and belonged to the bottom of a watercraft of sorts, with its distinct shape. It was recovered, identified as a sequoia, and was dated back to 1440 to 1640 AD. Due to its small size, it is believed to have been part of a smaller type of watercraft that one person could stand on. It would have probably been tied with bundles of sticks on either side. Lastly, another large worked plank that was used on the canoes, described by Ulloa, was found. This large piece was confirmed to be made of sequoia as well, and when it was tested, it was found that it is the oldest evidence of these watercraft discovered on Isla Cedros, dating back to around 1280 to 1400. With the evidence of these unique watercraft that have been found to date, they were able to confirm the accounts of the Spaniards who came across them, and add to the credibility that they were sturdy enough to make the journey from the island to the mainland. Due to the shape of the bottom plank, the canoe would not have to worry about swamping or water getting on board like what would happen with a dugout. This plank also provided a strong center of gravity, which meant that it would remain level. The previously mentioned bundles of sticks would also add to its stability, while also percolating the little water that got on board. These bundles curved upwards. With this shape, they could ride the waves and shield the crew from spray and swamping. Spanish accounts also talk about the routes used by the Humalguenos and even how long it took. The missionary Venegas, who is a crucial ethnographic source not only for the Humalguenos, but also the peoples of the Baja Peninsula, wrote in length about the watercraft of the island, and whose work will be referenced frequently throughout the film. He observed in one instance, in 1732, of some boys and neophytes from the mainland hastily building a canoe, and how it took half a day to cross between Punta Eugenia on the mainland to Isla Natividad, a distance of 7.5 kilometers as the crow flies. If this is how long it took for a quickly built vessel to traverse the stretch, then it is more likely it would have taken less time for a craft that was constructed with greater skill and time. It was important for these natives to carefully time their voyages, as thunderstorms and waves, especially during the winter season, made crossing nearly impossible, if not outright dangerous. Yet when the seas were calmer, frequent voyages from the islands to the mainland and vice versa would have been possible to complete multiple times within a week, as was noted by Venegas. Quote, "The two boats had already been prepared on the beach since the previous day, and thus, as soon as they arrived, those who could comfortably fit got on board. They arrived happily at the island of the martyrs, Natividad Island, and continuing the transportation in the following days. Within a week, everyone was already on that island." Unquote. Thus, as previously mentioned at the beginning of the film, this led to the Humalguenos being in frequent contact with the peoples of the mainland. One of the main trade items they received was obsidian from the mainland, which has been found on the island. Although no concrete proof has yet been found or recorded, it is likely the obsidian was exchanged for marine mammal pelts. This is due to one account noting how the watercraft were used for procuring marine resources. Quote, "Half an hour after sunrise, 5 balsas that each carried 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 men came out from the island and the part where it seemed that the people had gathered before and went out to sea, much further from land than we were, and they were fishing without any fear, or at least it would appear from their calm demeanor, and they returned to their settlement." Unquote. With the importance of the watercraft to the economy of the island and mainland, one question remains. What was the significance of the canoes in Humalgueno society? Ulloa was able to give a probable example of the canoes used as some sort of litter for an important older individual. Quote, "In the boat that the 4 men came in, there came one man older than the others, and he did not paddle, but rather was given all the things that we gave to the other men. It seemed to us that he must be something more than the others." Unquote. There is confirmed the existence of a social hierarchy amongst the Humalguenos in other accounts. Thus, researchers concluded that based on who the passengers of the watercraft were, would determine what it was being used for. Something interesting to note that besides redwood driftwood coming from the north, another item that drifted onto Isla Cedros were the tamols, the sturdy stone plank canoes of the Chumash in Southern California. The missionary Daraval wrote about how they washed up onto the shores of the island. Quote, "But those of the other islands to the north, in the diversity, as well as in the ingeniousness of their manufacturing, reveal their ability and their more cultivated skill. The same is manifested in their balsas, which have no comparison with the rest of the Californias, nor even with those of Isla Cedros. These balsas that they, the neophytes from San Ignacio Mission, found washed up on the coast and on the second island, Isla Cedros, are formed very flat, long planks, very smooth and planed. They are so well united and joined together, and caulked with a tar so tough that it seems the convex of a ship. They substitute for nails a kind of twine so thin that it causes admiration to see. They assure me of its being of a quite thin type. Well, together with the tar, it joins the planks in such a manner that they seem like inlay work. From all this is inferred, not only that there are inhabitants on these islands to the north, but also that they are very industrious and capable of their works." Unquote. Thus, the Humalguenos were familiar with the tamols, and even noticed how the craftsmanship and items differed from theirs. Back to the watercraft of the Humalguenos. Unfortunately, by the time of Venegas' account in the 1730s, the island had been struck with a plague of smallpox. According to him, many came to the mainland on their watercraft to be baptized and live on the newly established mission. 1732 is the date established as all of the Humalguenos being relocated to the mainland. However, with the discovery of the giant worked sequoia plank that was dated to the 1750s at the latest, it is possible that they held out longer than was believed and were able to maintain an ancient custom of creating unique sturdy watercraft for a few more decades.